10 years ago, a full-ride scholarship with my name on it could have changed everything, paid my tuition, covered my rent, maybe even given me the chance to breathe for once. I didn't know it existed until last week, when I found it hidden in my parents' attic, still sealed in its envelope, untouched. And the worst part? They'd already spent it, just not on me. I hadn't been back to my parents' house in over a year, but when Mom called and said they were finally downsizing to a condo, I agreed to come help pack. I told myself it was just a practical visit, one afternoon of boxing up knickknacks and moving furniture. But as I pulled into the familiar driveway, I felt that odd weight in my chest. The kind you get when a place is familiar but no longer feels like yours. Inside, nothing had changed. The air was warm, scented with cinnamon and clove, but beneath it was that distinct aroma of aging wood and dust. From the kitchen, the faint hiss of the kettle mixed with the scratchy hum of an old radio, playing some crooner from the 70s. Mom's voice floated out, soft and lilting, like this was a cozy reunion instead of just a task to get done. She was in her element, pouring tea, fussing with the coasters, chatting about how we'll finally have more space for guests, as if this was a move toward something better, not a slow stripping away of history. We started with the easier rooms, hall closets, the spare bedroom, before working our way up to the attic. The ceiling hatch groaned when Dad pushed it open, sending down a puff of air thick with insulation and time. I climbed the narrow ladder, the wood creaking under my weight, and pulled myself into a dim, dusty space I hadn't seen since I was a child. Cardboard boxes were stacked in uneven towers, their sides bowed from years of holding more than they should. I was sorting through a pile of mismatched holiday decorations when my hand brushed something different, solid, heavier. Pushed halfway behind a trunk was a small wooden chest, its surface dulled with dust, a brass clasp mottled with greenish rust. The lock was so corroded it looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. For a moment, I just crouched there, running my fingers along the grain of the wood. There was something strangely familiar about it, a memory at the edge of recall, like seeing a face in a dream and not knowing why it stays with you. I couldn't place it, but I knew I'd seen this box before. Somewhere. Sometime. And for reasons I couldn't explain, my heartbeat quickened, as if it was already keeping a secret I wasn't supposed to find. The rusted lock wasn't much of a challenge. One quick twist with my pocket knife and it snapped open, the dry click echoing in the dim, silent attic. The sound made me shiver, like I'd just unlocked a door someone had worked very hard to keep shut for years. As I lifted the lid, a breath of stale air escaped, carrying the scent of yellowed paper, aged wood, and a faint sharpness of time. I carefully peeled back the old newspaper lining the top, revealing items arranged with an unusual neatness. On top were a few elementary school certificates, faded ink, curled edges, tiny bite marks where mice had once nibbled. Beneath them lay a stack of letters bound with a frayed silver ribbon, the fabric worn and colorless. My fingers brushed over them, feeling the rough texture of the paper, pausing as a wave of familiarity washed over me, as if each envelope held a fragment of a memory I'd forgotten. And then I saw it. A thick envelope, cream-colored, still sealed. No tears, no sign it had ever been opened. In the upper left corner was the logo of a prestigious scholarship foundation, a name I had once pinned my hopes on in my final year of high school before my mother cut them down with a cold. "There's no scholarship for you. Don't waste your time." My hand froze over the edge of the paper. My heartbeat seemed to slow, then quicken, not from simple excitement, but from a strange, layered feeling, both familiar and foreign, like standing before a door I'd once touched but was never allowed to walk through. I slid my finger under the seal and tore it open. The sound of paper ripping was sharp, like a slice through the quiet. Inside was a thick sheet of white paper, the first word printed in bold. Congratulations. I read on, my eyes locked to each line. The foundation is pleased to award you a 4-year full scholarship, including living expenses. The date, 10 years ago. I couldn't breathe. Beneath the letter was a check, enough to have completely changed the course of my college years. It was still intact, never deposited. At first, I was stunned, as if I'd just stumbled upon a treasure buried in my own house. But the wonder quickly gave way to a choking confusion. Why was it here? Why had no one ever given it to me? Why was I only learning about it after 10 years? Then the memories began to surface, piece by piece, like a slow, bitter film reel. Winter nights. Working late shifts to cover my dorm fees. Dinners that consisted of instant noodles and water. The phone call where I'd hoped for some financial help, only to be told, "We don't have extra money. You'll have to manage on your own." They fit together into a picture, so sharp it hurt. This wasn't a lost letter. This wasn't a mailing error. This was mine. And someone my own family had deliberately kept it from me. I stared at the check, my hands trembling, not from cold, but from the tidal wave of emotions rising in me. Surprise. Confusion. And then, a painful clarity. I had been robbed of a life-changing opportunity, in silence, so completely that I hadn't even known I'd had it. I sat there on the attic floor, the check resting in my lap, and the weight of a decade pressed down on me. The moment I touched that envelope, memories I hadn't invited began lining up, each one sharper than the last. I remembered the spring I was applying to colleges, how I'd cobbled together applications during stolen moments between shifts. At the time, I was working 3 jobs, one at a campus cafe that paid in cash under the table, one stocking shelves in a grocery store after midnight, and one tutoring high school kids in math on weekends. My diet was a rotation of instant noodles, canned soup, and whatever leftovers I could sneak home from the cafe. There was a semester when I almost dropped out. Tuition had gone up without warning, and I was already drowning in fees. I'd called home late one night, exhaustion fraying my voice, hoping, just hoping, they might meet me halfway. Mom's answer came quick, flat, without room for negotiation. "There's no scholarship out there for you, honey. You'll have to figure it out yourself." And I did. I sold my guitar. I sold the coat I'd saved for months to buy. I sold my weekends and my sleep to keep my spot in school. Meanwhile, my sister was on a different planet entirely. The same year I was counting coins to buy a week's worth of noodles, she was boarding a flight to Paris for her semester abroad. She had a brand new laptop, crisp bills for pocket money, and a wardrobe that could fill 2 suitcases. All of it, I was told, came from the family savings Mom and Dad had worked so hard to protect. It had never crossed my mind to ask where that savings came from. I thought maybe they'd budgeted for her, or maybe they'd just decided she was worth the investment. That hurt enough on its own. But sitting there now, holding proof in my hands, I realized the truth was so much worse. That savings had my name on it. My scholarship. My opportunity. They hadn't just chosen her over me. They'd taken what was mine and pretended it had never existed. It was almost elegant, the way they'd erased it. No confrontation, no messy explanations, just a quiet theft, wrapped in the kind of silence that made you question your own memory. And I'd accepted it. I'd built my whole adult life on the belief that no one was coming to help me, not realizing someone already had, and my family had locked it in a box. Now, as the truth settled in, I could feel something inside me harden. Not anger exactly. Anger is hot, quick, burns out fast. This was colder, steadier. A resolve I'd never felt before. I wasn't going to ask them why. I already knew the answer. The only thing left was deciding what I was going to do with it. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't even call. Instead, I slid the letter and the check back into the envelope, tucked it carefully into my bag, and drove home in silence. The temptation to demand answers right then was sharp, but sharper still was the instinct to move quietly. I'd learned long ago that when it came to my family, emotion was a weapon they could twist against me. At my apartment, I laid everything out on the kitchen table like evidence, because that's what it was. The letter.
The check.
The envelope with the Scholarship Foundation's embossed logo. My name typed neatly on every page. The date glaring back at me like a dare. The next morning, I called the foundation. My hands were steady, my voice calm, but my pulse felt like a drumbeat in my ears. The woman on the other end was polite, warm even, as she asked for my name and the reference number printed on the award letter. I could hear her keyboard clicking, the faint hum of an office behind her. "Yes," she said after a moment. "You were awarded a full 4-year scholarship, including an annual living stipend. We mailed the acceptance packet and the first-year check to the address you provided in your application." I hesitated. And what address was that? There was the briefest pause before she read it back. My parents' house. I thanked her, voice even, and asked if she could confirm whether the funds had ever been claimed. More typing, another pause. It appears the check was never deposited, which means, legally, the disbursement was never fulfilled. I let the words sink in. She continued, "If you submit a reissue request, along with proof of identity, we can still process the award retroactively. Because it was never cashed, the funds are still tied to your name." Still tied to my name. For 10 years, they'd been telling me there was nothing. And all this time, the money, the opportunity, the recognition, it had been sitting there, mine in every sense except possession. When I hung up, I didn't feel joy.
Not yet.
What I felt was a steady, deliberate current of resolve. They had kept this from me, but they couldn't keep it forever. Not anymore. The night before the move, we sat down for one last family dinner in the house. The table was set the way Mom liked, cloth napkins, mismatched wine glasses she called eclectic, candles burning low. She talked about how different things would be in the condo, how she'd miss the garden but not the upkeep. Dad grumbled about the cost of movers between mouthfuls of roast chicken. My sister scrolled her phone under the table, her fork moving automatically from plate to mouth. I waited until the main course was nearly done, until the wine had softened their voices and everyone had settled into that post-meal rhythm of small talk and half-listening. Then, without a word, I reached into my bag and placed the envelope in the center of the table. The thick ivory paper looked almost out of place among the crumbs and silverware. "I found this," I said evenly, "up in the attic." Mom's eyes darted to it, then away, like she was afraid staring too long might make it explode. Dad glanced at it once, then went back to his plate before letting out a long, deliberate sigh. "That's old news," he said, waving a hand as if brushing off a speck of dust. "No point in dredging that up now." My sister leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "Wait, is that, oh?" She smirked, almost amused at her own realization. "That's the scholarship Mom and Dad used to help me enroll, right?" There was no hesitation in her tone.
No guilt.
Just a matter-of-fact acknowledgement, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I turned to her slowly. "No," I said, my voice steady enough to slice the air. "It was mine. And now, I'm taking it back." The room went still, as if someone had drawn all the oxygen out of it. Mom's fork clinked against her plate. Dad's jaw tightened. My sister blinked, caught between confusion and offense. But I didn't look away. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one avoiding eye contact, pretending not to notice. This time, they could be the ones sitting in the silence. I didn't wait for their responses. No shouting match, No barrage of questions, no desperate demand for them to explain themselves. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood, and stood. The envelope stayed on the table between the half-empty wine glasses and the cooling plates. "I think that's all we need to say," I murmured. And then I walked out, past the framed family photos on the wall, past the doorway where I used to leave my backpack after school, past the front door that had always felt more like a checkpoint than a welcome. At home, I spread the letter and check out again under the kitchen light, the way you'd lay out a map before a long journey. This time, it wasn't just a reminder of what they'd taken. It was the blueprint for what I was about to reclaim. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not a friend of a friend attorney, but someone whose entire practice revolved around contract enforcement and financial restitution. I explained the situation in full, sent scans of every document, and by the end of our first meeting, the path forward was clear. The funds were legally mine, and the foundation was obligated to reissue them. Then I made another call to a local journalist I knew from my volunteer work. I didn't name names, but I told the story about how scholarship awards can vanish into the wrong hands, about how some students never even know they've been chosen, about how a signature on the wrong envelope can rewrite an entire future. She listened quietly, asked questions, and promised to cover it. 3 weeks later, the foundation sent a formal letter. They would reissue the entire amount, adjusted for inflation and with interest. It was a number I'd never imagined seeing in my bank account, and it came with an apology. When the article ran in the Sunday paper, it didn't mention my family. But the people in our small community weren't stupid. Whispers started. Neighbors stopped by the moving sale, glancing a little too long at my parents' faces. The sympathy that had once been automatic was now something they had to earn, and they couldn't. I didn't gloat. I didn't send them a copy of the article. I didn't need to. The truth had a way of traveling on its own. And now it was finally walking in my direction. The shift didn't happen all at once, but I could see it, like watching a picture fade in reverse. The image my parents had so carefully curated over the years, the narrative of sacrificing everything for their children, began to unravel thread by thread. Neighbors who once praised them for their generosity now offered only polite nods. The invitations they used to receive, holiday parties, community events, started to dry up. People remembered the story from the paper, even if no names were printed. My sister wasn't spared either. Without the quiet financial stream that had always flowed her way, her life shrank in ways she wasn't prepared for. The trip she'd been planning to Italy was canceled. The lease on her trendy apartment expired, and she moved back in with my parents. She complained online about toxic negativity and people not supporting artists, but the truth was simpler. She no longer had my scholarship money propping her up. As for me, the check finally cleared, every cent mine. I didn't spend it on a new car or a vacation, though God knows I could have. Instead, I opened an account and founded a small scholarship fund of my own. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to help a few students every year, kids who were like I had been, scraping by, trying to hold on to a dream with tired hands. I named the fund after a memory that was mine alone, one untouched by anyone else's version of the past. A quiet act of reclamation. A legacy I built myself, from the very thing they had tried to take away. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven them. I tell them this: real worth doesn't come from enduring mistreatment just to be acknowledged. It comes from acknowledging yourself, fully, unapologetically, and refusing to hand that power over to anyone. And that, more than the money, more than the justice, was the real return on my investment in walking away. If this story made you feel something, whether it was sadness, anger, or empathy, leave a comment. I want to know what you think. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so we can share more real stories, more moments of taking back your own worth. Every sub, Every like from you is a way to make this voice reach further.